There's nothing more interesting than watching Republicans do this cute little dance denying the reality of the racist history of the United States. Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, he spoke against racism and he was like, that stuff don't exist, until he took his ass to Iowa, where the white folks in Iowa were like, yeah, we ain't really interested in voting for this dude because he reminds us of the 9/11 people. They basically were like, man, that dark skin, I don't know. And see, I dare say the only reason Nikki Haley has fared better than Vivek is because she looked white. His problem is he looked black. And they like, damn, you about as dark as Obama. So Nikki, now going from one white state, Iowa, to the next snow white state, New Hampshire, was doing an interview on the network that more white folks love than anything else, Fox News. And this so-called smart woman, who's an Indian American, said this.
Are you a racist party? Are you involved in a racist party?
No. We're not a racist country, Brian. We've never been a racist country. Our goal is to make sure that today is better than yesterday. Are we perfect? No. But our goal is to always make sure we try and be more perfect every day that we can. I know I faced racism when I was growing up, but I can tell you today is a lot better than it was then. Our goal is to lift up everybody, not go and divide people on race or gender or party or anything else. We've had enough of that in America. That's why I'm so passionate about doing this. I don't want my kids growing up where they're sitting there thinking that they're disadvantaged because of a color or a gender. I want them to know that if they work hard, they can do and be anything they want to be in America.
Run that back.
Party? Are you involved in a racist party?
No. We're not a racist country, Brian. We've never been a racist country. Our goal is to make sure that...
Stop. Now, Nikki just said, we've never been a racist country. Give me 1 second. I want y'all to leave my microphone up. Okay? Now, play.
Today is better than yesterday. Are we perfect? No. But our goal is to always make sure we try and be more perfect every day that we can. I know I faced racism when I was growing up.
Stop. Nikki Haley said, we've never been a racist country. 10 seconds later, Nimrata said, I faced racism growing up. So, Nikki, if you face racism growing up and America's never been a racist country, then did that happen in India? Where your mom and daddy came from? Was it in Pakistan? Was that in North America, South America? Was it in Canada? I'm confused. Now, the reason that's hilarious is because how can you let it come out? You just got done getting your ass whooped on the slavery issue. How in the world can somebody actually say America has never been a racist country when we literally partition black people as 3/5 humans in the U.S. Constitution? How could anybody allow to come out of their mouth that we've never been a racist country when for 248 years black people were enslaved? How can anybody suggest that we've never been a racist country when there was the election in 1876, then you had the Great Compromise in 1877, which ushered in 92 years of Jim Crow, and we saw in this country this happen frequently all across the country. We saw 4,000 plus people. We can't even account for all of the people who have been lynched in this country. You had individuals burned who were tortured in the United States of America. We had individuals who were, this is a barbecue. We had Americans who literally went to lynchings like it was a picnic in this country. We saw individuals who, but because they either spoke to a white woman or because they actually owned a black business. We saw Tulsa in 1921, the race massacre. We saw Rosewood. We saw Red Summer coming out of Chicago. We literally saw in this country numerous race wars happening all across this country, and it was race wars. They lynched men, they lynched women, they lynched children. We saw what happened after Nat Turner. That is the country that we're living in. We sit there and we still have people today who actually were fire hosed, dogs sicked on them, trying to actually go vote. Black people who were viciously beaten. Nimrata, what do you call this other than racism? This is video from Bloody Sunday. Absolutely racist, fire cannons, folks who were beaten, John Lewis and others, beaten to an inch of their lives because they were black people who simply wanted to exercise the right to vote. You had a United States military Nimrata that until 1948 segregated troops in its military. There were race wars in depots where you had white soldiers and black soldiers. Nimrata, you are so dumb. Where Ethan McHaley makes clear in his book on the Chicago Defender. Well, the United States government wanted to try black newspaper owners with treason because they were writing stories about racism in the United States military. One of the racist presidents we've ever had was Woodrow Wilson, who 2 blocks from this office on Black Lives Matter Plaza showed the birth of a nation. This man abandoned the hiring of black people in the federal government. You had Herbert Hoover, who was president of the United States, who was the head of the lily white faction of the Republican Party. You cannot sit here and say America was never racist. You had, of course, racism in education, racism in the military, racism in corporate America, racism in every facet of this industry. When Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, not only did Hitler not shake his hand, FDR did not shake his hand when he came back to the United States. And he was forced to walk through the kitchen at an awards dinner in New York City, what was there to celebrate him winning 4 gold medals. You cannot tell me that, oh my God, America has never been a racist country. When Jackie Robinson dealt with racial hatred just for playing baseball, when Hank Aaron got thousands of racist letters and death threats because he was on the verge of breaking the record of Babe Ruth. You can't call this country racist when black people will get in swimming pools, and in order to get them out, white racist individuals will pour acid in the swimming pool in order to force them out. Literally, Nimrata, that's the history. But you know what? You should know, because you said you faced racism as a kid, but you didn't just face racism. Your mama and your daddy faced racism. Michael Harriot put out these tweets where he laid out in a thread the racism and the history of Nikki Haley. He laid out, y'all want to hear the true story of Nikki Haley? He then said in the 1920s, a nativist white nationalist movement began to rise in America. It was anti-immigrant racist, and it gave rise to what we now call the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan. What was it called? He said it's estimated that 1 in 7 white men were card-carrying members of the Klan during this movement. This is when Donald Trump's father was arrested at a Klan rally. One of the hallmark pieces of legislation during this white nationalist trend was the national origins formula. Please go to the next tweet. He lays out 1921, Congress came up with a law that limited how many people could immigrate to the U.S. from each country. That's called racism, Nikki. White Anglo-Saxon countries could come, but Eastern Europeans and other non-white countries had specific limits. In 1923, Bhagat Singh Thind from Amritsar, Punjab, India, filed a Supreme Court case arguing that the immigration quotas shouldn't apply to Asian Indians because they were literally Caucasian. Really? The Supreme Court agreed, saying, yeah, you're Caucasians, but you ain't white. Next. That precedent stood until 1965, when LBJ signed the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. Why did he do it? Because black people fought for civil rights. Because of desegregation and other civil rights laws, Republicans fled the GOP. One of these laws' fiercest opponents was the Daughters of the Confederacy. This is when they began putting up Confederate monuments. In 1961, South Carolina affixed a Confederate flag to its courthouse. One of the interesting results of this white supremacist backlash was the segregation academy. Rather than attend integrated schools, white parents created private, all-white schools all over the South. Most of these schools still exist, although they rarely speak of their origin story. Now, I don't want y'all to think that the civil rights struggle was over. For instance, an incident considered the bloodiest event of the civil rights era happened in February 1968 when cops opened fire on black students at South Carolina State. Most were shot in the back. A few months later, in 1969, Ajit Singh Randhawa and his wife, Raj Kaur Randhawa, took advantage of a new immigration law and immigrated to the U.S. from Amritsar district, Punjab, India. 3 years later, their daughter, Nimrata Randhawa, was born. Next, Nimrata's father taught at Voorhees, an HBCU in Denmark, South Carolina, and lived in neighboring Bamberg. Her mom taught in the public schools. At one time, my family owned the only restaurant in Denmark, so I spent a lot of time there and at Voorhees, the local HBCU. They are black as fuck. But Nimrata would never. So Nimrata enrolled at nearby Orangeburg preparatory schools, a collection of actual segregation academies, and became Nikki. Why? Because she's Caucasian, even if she isn't white. Now here's where it gets crazy. When Nimrata became governor of South Carolina, she refused to take down the Confederate flag. She said the white supremacist banner was a symbol of heritage and history. It is possible that Nimrata believed this. See, she went to a racist school. She was Caucasian. She rejected inclusion. It's quite possible that Nimrata never knew that flag was the Confederate battle flag of Virginia. Nimrata was too dumb to know it, had never spent a nanosecond in South Carolina until a century after the Civil War. But when she became a state legislator, black people told her that it stood for white supremacy. She wouldn't take it down. They boycotted. She wouldn't take it down. When she became governor, she was told that it represented a failed war. Nimrata refused. On June 17th, the white supremacist terrorists, beckoned by the flag Nimrata supported, walked into Emmanuel AME Church and slaughtered 9 black people as they prayed. Bottom line is this here, people. Nimrata is so desperate to appeal to white Republicans that she will deny reality with it slapping her in her face. Michael Harriet with The Root joins us right now. Michael, not only did her daddy, let's be clear, he couldn't get a job anywhere else except at HBCU, Michael. Her mama also was a dressmaker, and her mama could not even get paid by white folks, so black folks bought her stuff. This woman literally, her family earned a living because of black people, and she goes, there was no racism in America. What are you talking about?
Right, and we have to understand, like, the history of Nikki Haley. She got where she is because of the work and the resistance of black people, not only just because of the dress shop that her mom owned. But remember, her mother's first job was teaching at a majority black school district in Bamberg County schools, right? And Nikki even says in her autobiography that with the first house that they rented, they couldn't live in a white neighborhood, so they rented a house, and the person told her, "We will rent it to you on one condition: you can never allow black people to come into your house. You can never entertain them in your house." So that's how they got someplace to live. So she knows the history of race in this country. Her high school was her school was a segregation academy. She didn't have a single black person in her school the year she graduated. It was formed because of Brown versus Board
And
of
Michael, hold
Education.
on, Michael, when did she graduate?
She graduated in 1989. The Confederate flag was still flying over her school when she graduated.
She graduated in 1989, y'all. I graduated high school in 1987. This woman is a fraud, Michael. She is the worst kind of fraud. She literally is Stephen from Django. She will say whatever has to be said in order to appeal to white conservatives in the Republican Party.
Right. That's what she's always been doing. Because, one question no one ever asked about Nikki Haley, because she takes credit for taking that flag or removing that flag from South Carolina State House, even though she did, right? The legislature did that. But if we were critical thinkers, right, we would ask, well, if you had the power to remove that flag in 2015, and we're going to give you all the credit for removing it, that also means that you chose to leave it up from 2011 when you were elected to 2015 when a white supremacist walked into a church and slaughtered 9 people. For those 4 years, you thought it was perfectly fine, even though, according to you, you knew what the cause of the Civil War was. You knew it was because of slavery. You knew what that flag represented. You were a Civil War buff, as you claim, right? So you knew what it stood for. You knew what it meant. You knew it was a white supremacist symbol, and you chose to leave it up because, according to you, you had the power to take it down because you said you did, right? So those first 4 years, you just left it up because you didn't care about black people.
And she's saying these things when literally her fellow Indian American, I mean, when she's sitting here, she's watching what's happened to Vivek, what's happened to him, and literally white folks in Iowa, yeah, I mean, I ain't really trying to vote for this dude because he remind me of them 9/11 people. What the hell you call that? And then this whole deal, and not only that, I want there to be a key word. I want y'all to understand a key word, a key phrase that she used. Play it again and listen for something. I'm going to point it out to y'all.
Are you a racist party? Are you involved in a racist party?
No. We're not a racist country, Brian. We've never been a racist country. Our goal is to make sure that today is better than yesterday. Are we perfect? No. But our goal is to always make sure we try and be more perfect every day.
Okay, are we perfect? No. That means that you got some baggage in your closet. That means you got some stuff you don't want nobody to know. Oh, we're striving to get better. We're striving. It's like she like her brain is saying, ain't no way in the world I can even acknowledge American history. Here's what's so crazy, Michael. Hell, even the biggest racists will acknowledge American racism.
Right. Especially somebody from South Carolina. But if you notice, there's something else in that clip. There's something else that you might notice in that clip, right? He didn't ask her if America was a racist country. He asked her if she was a part of a racist party.
Boom.
And she never addressed that part, right? She skipped right to a racist country, right? She didn't even want to address the GOP's racism. She went right to country, right? She went right to that old Tim Scott, that old, trope of, America is not a racist country, because she didn't want to address the reality of today. Like, she went back to the past because she didn't want to address it today. And if you notice, Nikki Haley's whole career, she became a celebrated person in her party by touting that, hey, if you vote for me, we can show that we are a diverse party. So she talks about race when she wants to, when it's advantageous for her. But when she wants to skip over the question and go from party to country, she can do that because she knows the truth. She was raised in a state that is 27% black. Her entire administration had one single black person in it. One single black person in a state that is 27% black. And the only way you can do that, right, is specifically exclude black people. You have to look for white people, right?
It's hard. It's hard to skip over black people in South Carolina.
Right. Especially educated black people, because South Carolina citizens, or the black citizens, are disproportionately higher educated. And you got to think about, right, like if you go back to the segment that you just had, right, about diversity in the airline industry, it's always curious to me how these people are never asked to explain how they manage to create these white structures that are so lily white when there are black people right in front of their faces, right? Like, she didn't even choose she didn't even allow the person in charge of the South Carolina archives. She didn't even put a black person in charge of that, when 40% of the black people in America, their ancestry comes through South Carolina. And I know that because my aunt created the organization. Before my aunt created it in the 1990s, there was not an organization to preserve black history in the state where where America's black history comes from. And she skipped over all of those qualified black people to specifically search for white people who aligned with her racist ideology, so that she wouldn't offend the white people in her party.
And I also want people to know that South Carolina deliberately, I need y'all to listen to what I'm saying, white racists in South Carolina deliberately maneuvered to keep South Carolina out of the Brown versus Board of Education ruling. What I mean by that is they did not want segregated education to end on the basis of a lawsuit in South Carolina. Okay, was one of the original states where Thurgood Marshall went. But they were so focused on that, Michael. They said, we need to maneuver this thing. And so when it was consolidated and Topeka became the lead, South Carolina was like, "Whoo, good. Our name is not going to be on that sucker for history."
Roland, boy, you cooking right now, boy, because you know that's a beef with my family. We've had that family for years. Like, literally right now, there's a petition that my family has going around to change the name for the 75th anniversary of Brown versus Board to Briggs versus Elliott. Briggs versus Elliott was alphabetically the first, so if you would have gone by the alphabet, it would have been named after a family, the Briggs family, a black family from South Carolina. If you would have gone chronologically, the South Carolina, that black family, filed the first of the lawsuits that became Brown versus Board of Education. But because they didn't want that decision to be anchored to a state from the South, they just arbitrarily used white supremacy to change the name of the lawsuit. It should really be named Briggs versus Elliott. So yeah, I mean, you bringing up old beefs right now with me, and it's the truth, right? Like, but because people like Nikki Haley want to erase and whitewash history, we never talk about these issues.
And since Nikki, because remember, the initial question that Brian Kilmeade asked her was, "Is your party racist?" Go to my iPad. This right here, y'all, is July 14, 2022. House Republicans all vote against neo-Nazi probe of military police. The same Republicans voted against the resolution from Jamal Bowman after 10 black people were gunned down in Buffalo, calling out white supremacy. This is the exact same Republican Party and Donald Trump leading the way did not want all of those Confederate names taken off of military bases. These are the same people who defend Confederate monuments. So it's amazing to me how she couldn't answer that question when literally her party is the party that's doing all it can to preserve every symbol of white supremacy and domestic terrorists in this country.
Right, exactly. And then when you look at even when it relates to history and education, right? Like we talk about Ron DeSantis, but South Carolina was the first state to pass what we call those anti-critical race theory laws. They passed the legislation that defined those 7 principles that we now call CRT, right? And that was Nikki Haley's home state. So they have always led the way, even under Nikki Haley, in America's fascination and cementing of white supremacy. And Nikki Haley is part of that legacy. Nikki Haley was part of the legacy before she was governor. She was as a state legislator. She was part of it as governor, even in the UN, right? And now she's fighting to become part of that legacy as a presidential candidate. But for some reason, right, we think she's a moderate when all of her actions have shown that she is more radical than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is really about Donald Trump, right? He uses race as a dog whistle to gain power. Nikki Haley knows how to put those policies into actions and to cement white supremacy as a systemic force to suppress and oppress black people. So she's more skilled at that than Donald Trump or even Ron DeSantis.
Absolutely. Folks, Michael Harrod, he is the author of the bestseller Black AF History. Y'all know what that stands for. The Unwhitewashed Story of America. Michael, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
And all these other things are conditions and problems, and I bet you had more than other people have.
I didn't even say that. I said they were different. I'll tell you this. When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only, one reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong, I might have gone to Timbuktu. I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than it already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You have to be able then to turn off all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody.
Everybody, no matter who, no matter what his attitude, is bigoted.
I did not say that.
Well, has an attitude, it's on his face, is in the way of every boss.
But you're asking me to do something impossible. You're asking me to take the will for the deed. I don't know what most white people in this country feel, but I can only include what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church which is black. I know, as Malcolm X once put it, that the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means that I can't afford to trust most white Christians, and certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is anything against black people, but I know the real estate lobbies keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks I give my children to read and the schools that we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
I wonder, Mustafa, if Namrata has seen that clip.
I hope she has, but if she did, the question would be, would that information find fertile ground or not? You know, I love James Baldwin. I'm a Baldwinite. I remember when he said that if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. I hope people will take that particular quote when they're thinking about Nikki Haley, because you often only see what people want you to see, you know, the pretty words, you know, looking in the appropriate manner. Making sure that when it's Dr. King's birthday that you send out, you know, words of saying how much you support and appreciate his mission, you know, but then they don't take a look and say and ask the question, is there anything that's really different between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley? Is there anything really different between Governor DeSantis and Nikki Haley? Because as much as she might want to clean it up, it still has that same bite of racism. It still has that same anchoring to systemic injustices. So, you know, when Baldwin runs through all those things, you have to ask the question, well, what did Nikki Haley do to change any of those dynamics when she was governor in South Carolina? And if you actually take a look at that record, you will see a record that's not so different than DeSantis, that's not so different than Trump, and it's not so different than a number of folks who say that they want to lead this country. So then you have to ask yourself the question, why wouldn't I vote to make sure that someone who has shown a disregard for my community, why wouldn't I make sure that I vote to stop that from happening?
Larry, I doubt Nimrata has actually watched this video clip of Dr. King or any of these Republicans who were putting up their little BS quotes on yesterday.
Yeah. At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check. The problem. At the very same time that America...
Larry?
They don't want to talk about that, King. That's too radical. They want to keep it. They want to keep it. They want to keep it PR. Make sure they use the quotes that they like, and they keep repeating over and over again. And so King was unpacking a whole lot there, strictly about land and wealth, right? So a lot of times we don't talk about this in the United States. The largest landowners, and like Ted Turner and some of these other rich white men who own all this land. The other thing is, Roland, really quickly, he talked about the land grant schools. We could talk about what happened after that, 1890 schools, HBCUs that were passed after that. But the bottom line is, when we talk about wealth, and we connect it to Nikki Haley, who was governor of the first state to secede from the nation where the first shots of the Civil War were shot, and Fort Sumter, she understands what's going on here. But Roland, what's dangerous about people like Nikki Haley, she's part of a long line of people from minoritized backgrounds who will do whatever they need to do to sell their souls. We could talk about Jindal, Louisiana. We could talk about the current lieutenant governor in North Carolina, who will likely be the Republican nominee. We have to be very aware of those people that knock at the door and you open it, and they seem to have a shared experience, but when you turn your back, they will stab you in your back. Lastly, the thing that relates to Baldwin, I want people to go back and watch his debate with Buckley at Cambridge University in 1965, because many of the things in which Baldwin talked about, he continued to unpack in this debate against what America considered to be this conservative icon. So Nikki Haley is a fraud. And once again, she's one of those individuals in minoritized communities that you have to don't turn your back because you find yourself in trouble.
And look, Johanna, we also just can't ignore the reality of how this country and its colonialism in terms of how we treated other countries. We can't ignore the reality of the Berlin Conference and how African nations were split up and plundered for their resources. Let's not talk about Nikki Haley. She don't want to deal with, again, this is a new book by Stuart Reed. It's called The Lumumba Plot, The Secret History of the CIA and a Cold War Assassination, how the role the United States played in the assassination, the murder of Patrice Lumumba, just 2 months after the folks with the Congo got their independence from one of the most vicious racists in the history of this world, King Leopold. We could talk about other nations as well. Bottom line is, you cannot ignore American history, and this is why I need everybody understanding why folks have to exercise their right to vote because Donald Trump and this Republican Party, they absolutely believe in banning books, banning speech. They do not want the next generation of white students learning the real story of this country. And I keep saying to people, what scared white America to death were all of those young white kids out there supporting Black Lives Matter, protesting in the wake of George Floyd's death. And what you're seeing right now from the likes of Bill Ackman and Elon Musk and Nikki Haley and the Republican Party are white folks in this country who are deathly afraid of young white people knowing the real story of America.
You know, Roland, it is rather unfortunate because I think that Nikki Haley had an opportunity to really unite the country and to right some of the wrongs that she has done as former governor in the state of South Carolina. But the reality is that with Nikki Haley, one of my biggest issues with her is that she wants to be everything to everyone. So she speaks on both sides of her mouth. And therefore, she does not take a bold stance on many issues. And unfortunately, it has worked for her, right? She was a state legislator, she became governor, and she became the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And now she is fighting to become the next president of these United States. And when you look at her in comparison to her other candidates, not to say any one of them are better than her, but at least you know where they stand, right? You know their posture on many issues, including race issues, and they're very radical and very bold. Whereas with Nikki Haley, she says the right things depending on the audience and who's she's around. And it's not. And it's very common, unfortunately, with, and I'll say this as an immigrant in this country who wasn't born here. And I always tell everyone, I owe my success to African Americans, but for the struggles of African Americans and the civil rights movement, me, my family, we wouldn't be in this country. I wouldn't have enjoyed the opportunities that I have enjoyed today. It was my professors at historically Black colleges who nurtured me, who helped me to become the person that I am today. When I went to law school, my professors of Black law professor held my hand and make sure that I was able to pass my exams and successfully graduate. So a lot of times, I think as immigrants, we don't think about the plight of African Americans. And when we get in certain positions of power, we don't advocate for our brothers and sisters enough. And I would like to take this opportunity to call on, immigrants in this country to understand that it is important for us to unite with African Americans because but for their struggles and their continued struggles today, because whenever African Americans win a victory, whatever the issue may be, we benefit from it as immigrants. We must unite. And then if we're going to win this war and if we're going to make any kind of progress in this country, regardless of where you're from, whether you're from the African continent, the Caribbean, or anywhere else, we must unite to fight the system so that we can gain economic power and social justice in this country.
Well, I found one more doozy from Nikki that I had to go ahead and play. And so if y'all want to listen to this tongue twister, check this one out.
We were the only Indian family in our small southern town. I was teased every day for being brown. So anyone that wants to question it can go back and look at what I've said on how hard it was to grow up in the Deep South as a brown girl. Anybody can look at my record and see when Walter Scott was shot down by a dirty cop, how I made sure that the Walter Scott family didn't suffer because we put the first body camera bill in the country in place. Anybody can look at the fact that when we had 9 amazing souls die in Mother Emanuel Church, I did something that no Republican or Democrat ever wanted to touch, which was call for the Confederate flag to come down because it would take 2/3 of the House and Senate and was an impossible feat. I don't know what you're implying with that, but what I will tell you is saying that I had black friends is a source of pride. Saying that I had white friends is a source of pride. If you want to know what it was like growing up, I was disqualified from a beauty pageant because I wasn't white or black, because they didn't know where to put me. So look, I know the hardships, the pain that come with racism. It's the reason that I fight bullies every day when it comes to racism, anti-Semitism, or hate, and I always will. If I didn't mention slavery on that day, it's because that's an automatic. There's always been, the Civil War's always been known about slavery. I misread it and thought he was looking for a bigger answer going forward. So critics can say whatever they want. I'm very comfortable in my skin. I'm very comfortable with what I believe in, and my job is not to convince them.
And that, Mustafa, was a answer that she gave before that interview on Fox News.
There you go.
Yes.
That right there shows why you cannot listen and support Nikki Haley, because she will flip-flop as fast as you can flip a pancake.
It's very disingenuous. And, you know, she's got a problem moving forward, because people are going to continue to bring forward the clips that show who she truly is. And, you know, and these different types of dynamics that she gets herself into, where she says one thing in one setting and in another setting she wants to say something different and play to all audiences. And, you know, you can't do that. People really need to know who you are and how, you know, what you stand on. And she has a very difficult time in doing that.
Well, to me, it is quite hilarious to have to listen to her give an answer to anything, because my Lord, she will sit here and switch a position in a heartbeat, and then all of a sudden, matter of fact, I think that was a debate. I think it was in one of the town halls where Nikki, I mean, bruh, she literally denied saying something when they like, but you said it, we got the video. And she was, no, I didn't say that. They said, Nikki, we got the video. Like, we got the video of your ass saying it. She will, and that's when you know you're desperate. When an individual, and here's the deal, she and Vivette are the same. They will, you can play the video and they like, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. And you can go, no, Nikki, that's the video of you right there. No, that wasn't me. Y'all can't say, I ain't say that. And it's sitting right there. But you know, this shouldn't be a surprise, you know, because frankly, Nikki, she worked for Trump. And she lied as much as Donald Trump did. But Nikki, I'm gonna go ahead and end this ethering of you on this one here, Nikki. So, Nikki, when you say it was no racism in America, this is in Montgomery. This is the memorial to the thousands of people who were lynched in this country. So, Nikki, if you don't think there was racism in America, you really have no business even running for president. Because if you can't even understand that basic fact, I don't want your ass anywhere near the Oval Office.